Welcome back. If you aren't already following Naked, please take a minute to do so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Each follow means so much and it actually helps a lot. If you have more than just a minute, it would be absolutely incredible if you could leave a review and maybe even share an episode with a friend. I am relatively new to the pod world, especially new to the things that are important in the podcasting world. And apparently, reviews and follows are up there on the list of importance. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Welcome to Naked, where stories unfold. I'm your host, Janelle, a once former pastor's wife who exchanged small town living for a nomadic life. The unexpected change in our life led my husband and our 4 kids to traveling the world. From years of being rooted in our small town to the thrill of wandering the world, our story has been anything but ordinary. On our journeys, we've met amazing people, learned their way of life, and heard their unique stories, which has led me to understand the profound impact of shared experiences. In each episode, we explore moments of transformation, guided by one single question: is there a time in your life when everything changed? We invite ordinary storytellers like yourself to share the often unexpected turns in life. So grab a seat and settle in. This is the Naked Podcast. I grew up singing because my dad also grew up singing. His family was like the Van Tropps from The Sound of Music, only with so much more harmony. My grandma played the piano, my grandpa sang with their 6 kids. They sold their records as they traveled from towns and cities, sharing their beautiful blend of harmonies. My dad was determined to pass down his love for singing, and we love learning. Well, most of the time. Like learning any instrument, there's a season where you just go on repeat, doing the same thing over and over and over again until you finally get it. But singing became our thing. Me being the youngest in our family, I was a lot less comfortable with solos, and so I always took the background parts, perfectly happy being the background girl. Actually, a preferred spot. As my siblings grew up and moved on, I felt a bit lonely, especially because I was homeschooled at the time, and I really, really wanted friends. So I stepped out on my own and attended a youth group that a friend had told me about. Immediately, I was in. There were so many teens, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The teens had their own service, they were the band, they were the greeters. It felt like a bunch of kids were just doing life together. God got a spot there, and so did some leaders who made the whole thing run. Shortly after I started attending, I met the woman behind all the voices and musicians on the stage, Saralynn. Her voice was so soft. Her heart was all about the kids. She truly saw every one of us and really wanted us to see ourselves as she saw us. Slowly, she helped us find our confidence. Like I said earlier, I was a background girl, but she could see more in me. She spent years working with us. Those of us who had a desire to play or sing, but didn't quite have the confidence, skill, or maybe even the ear to hear it. She built us up, one rehearsal at a time. Eventually, I was leading songs, but not without her affirming smile from across the stage. Looking back now, I can only imagine the patience it would have taken to work with all of us kids. But she never got upset, never raised her voice. She was the calm, ever loving mentor with the best hugs and the softest voice we'd ever heard. She was really the reason any of us got on stage. It's been nearly 30 years since I met her, and though she has encountered a heartbreak that I will never fully understand, she has remained as the softest, most gentle, tender hearted woman I know. Her story is filled with questions, tears, hope, love, and her true reliance on God. She mentions in our conversations that it was about the people in her life, the people who knew her, and told her, Saralynn, we know who you truly are, and we love you. Those words and affirmations kept her going, reminding her who she is and who she's always been. When I first thought about starting Naked, I thought about Saralynn. I wondered how lonely she would have felt during her heartbreaking decade that changed everything in her life. And I wondered if she ever had a place to share her story. I was really unsure if I should even ask, but I did. She took some time to think about it and then said yes. Yes, I will share my story, and this will be the first time. You might need a tissue for today's episode, so grab a Kleenex box and join us. Thank you so much for being here. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today and having this time, this chat, this Zoom. I hope you brought a tea or some sort of delicious drink of your choice. Saralynn is one of my beloved I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Saralynn. She was a massive mentor for me in my younger years, and our journeys have, though haven't always stayed closely in touch, I feel like our hearts always have. So this time today, I feel so incredibly honored that you take the time to chat with me and tell me a little bit about your journey. So one of the questions I always ask and start with is what is one of the things in your life, and I'm, when I ask this question, there's actually many, when I think about this question to myself, there's so many times in my life I'm like, oh, that changed everything, no, that changed everything. So it's really up to anyone that joins me as to what part of the story they want to share. But one of the questions that I ask is, what is the one thing in your life that changed everything? And that's a big question, and
Yeah.
I know that could take us anywhere. But yeah, I just wanted to say that anything that comes out today is 100% the gratitude, because I think that as we share our stories, we encourage and help and bring strength and hope to others that are walking through their own journeys. And so I'm just so grateful for wherever these conversations take us, because I think that someone listening is going, yeah, me too. Um, so yeah, thank you so much
Mm-hmm.
for being here
Of course.
and for having this time
Yeah.
together. It's so good to see your face.
You too. So good to see you. Yeah. Oh, so you want to start there, hey? At what it was. Wow. Boy, there's been there's been a few significant times in my life, but probably the most significant is um well, when I was 20, in my 20s, I was married at 22, and then we tried to have a family, and we discovered that there was infertility with me, and so we couldn't conceive children. And so instead of taking the in vitro route, we decided to go through the adoption route. And just within months of discovering, of making that decision, we had met our first child that we adopted, and then 3 years later we adopted a sibling group of 3 girls.
Wow.
And so it was a whirlwind of activity to go to a family of 6, and it
Yeah.
was just a wonderful time. But we, for probably from 22 till 28, 6, 7 years there, um, there was just that yearning to have a family and to have it.
Yeah.
And then when it did happen, um, we just dove right into it. And my husband took off paternity leave, and from his work, he took
Wow.
off 9 months, almost a year, um, of work, so that he could bond
Wow.
and get to know the children and be a dad. And it was a wonderful time for us.
Wow.
And so we were just living the family life. And yeah, so that
Uh,
was a real pivotal time for us.
yeah, I didn't realize it happened so quickly. Like when you decided, okay, this is time, because sometimes that can take years um,
Yes,
between
yeah, I
between.
remember um, we had we had gotten the news that I wasn't ovulating, and it would be, um, we just couldn't conceive. And then we were just I had decided in my heart that I would be open to adoption. And then we went to in Red Deer, we went to a concert, an Andre Crouch concert at Jake and Mullins Church in Red Deer.
Okay.
And in that concert, I got, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, your child is on his way. And
Wow.
and I held that in my heart, and literally just within weeks of hearing that was when I was introduced to our first son.
Your first.
So that
Wow.
was really neat to have that confirmation and to know.
Yeah.
because after all those years, and then
Yeah,
for it to
totally.
happen away, it was just
And then 3
very,
years later, you said the
yeah.
siblings?
About 3 years later, then we another family from our church had introduced us to um, the social services in Calgary, and they were looking for an adoptive family for a sibling group at
Wow.
the, yeah, in there. So then we had three girls, and they were 4 months, 2.5, and 4.5
Oh
when
my
they
goodness.
so they were just all back to back. So we had the baby come first, and
Wow.
she was with us for 2 to 3 months while the other two were in another foster home, and they were coming and visiting and having sleepovers and getting used to their new family, forever
Yeah.
family they called it.
Yes.
So yeah,
Wow. Wow.
it was
They were little. You
most,
would have had gone from like somewhat, like not too busy, but with one to like just sailing, like spinning.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really, it was, but it was I had always wanted to be a mom. I had babysat since I was 12 years old, and just always had a baby on my hip. And I just would
Oh,
work in the church nursery, and I nannied
wow.
for many different families over the years. So
Well,
I,
and you
I
have like
love
that
children.
mothering nature about you. Like there's, I mean, even as a teen when I met you, it was just like you knew like Sarah's love like encompassed all of you. It's just like you had this extra, I don't know, like just an extra kind of love and grace where people just didn't feel like they couldn't be themselves. They just knew that they were just loved. And like we've talked before, that many of the youth that grew up with me and you being like our mentor with under worship and music and learning how to play and even learning how to be comfortable on stage, like you were the mother that like nested all of us and was like, okay, like you can do this and I'm gonna push you a little bit this way, but I'm here in case you need me. Like I remember my first time being on stage, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was so, even though I came from a musical family, I was so nervous to be on stage. I was the youngest of three, and my older siblings always kind of got like, they got the more invitations to do weddings and things like that. Cause I was just kind of young and silly and I didn't always, show up so professionally as they did. And then you, Kim, and you're like, you can do this, Janelle. And I was telling my kids the other day, I was like, what, sometimes we need people in our life to see us through. And sometimes we're going to make mistakes oftentimes in those spaces too. Because I remember it was many years later that I was singing on the church stage. Now I had like gone from the youth stage to the church stage, and the whole
Yeah.
song like blanked out of my brain, and I didn't know any of the words. And I looked at you, and you like mouthed the words to me like, "This is what they are," and then I still couldn't do it. So you just sang the song for me like it was no big deal.
Oh,
And
really?
you've always been that kind of like extra love kind of person of loving all of us. So I can
Wow.
only imagine that like you're yearning to have children and then not being able to, and all of a sudden having your house full of four little people must have been like your heart must have been so full, because I feel like you have all the love to give. Like you have abundance of it to give.
Yeah. Like it
Yeah.
was so, yeah, my heart was just full of love for them because yeah, it was, and they, they just bring such life to your
Mm.
to your home. Their presence, their,
Yeah.
um, yeah, they're just so beautiful. They each,
Yeah.
and they're so different in ways. But um, I had gone to your father-in-law, Phil Nordine, had
Mhm.
um, when I was the music director at his church, he had asked if we wanted to go to Nashville to a music conference
Okay.
at Christ Church Choir Church. And so your brother Jody and myself and Karen McNaughton and Andrew Hyman, we all went, the four of us. And it was an all expense paid. We had to pay our own stuff, but the hotel and the conference were paid for. And that just did so much for me that he believed and invested in us musically
Hmm.
to do that. And then at that conference, there was a family. Oh, there must have been at least 8 children in the family, but they were all homeschooled. The family, they toured and traveled together and played music. And the mother and daughter did a workshop at the conference called Leaving a Musical Legacy.
Hmm.
And that was just after our son had come in. So that was 22 years ago, probably, but he, I wanted to leave that a musical legacy for my children. So
Hmm.
we started. It was in my family. I took piano and clarinet and saxophone and ukulele, all these different instruments. So my whole family was musical, and my 2 older sisters sang, and they were the ones. I feel for you, like out of the family of 3, I was the baby of the family as well. And my 2 older sisters, they just were quite confident in their music ability and vocal ability, and I was just the one to sing harmony and to just fit in. And I didn't. It just felt different for me, but they had this musical ability, and I learned, and we took voice lessons together. And
Hmm.
then when my children came, then I started my son with violin after that um, conference. Then it inspired me, and I've always loved the violin, but I just wanted to get him involved in that. And then the other 3 girls took violin, and then I taught them piano as well. So they
Wow.
they have had that musical training since they were all 3, 4 years old.
That's amazing. I remember hearing the girls
And,
play at one point, being like, wow.
oh,
I feel
yeah,
like they were just little, so little, or maybe they were just tinkering, but I remember the 3 of them, or at least the 2 of them were playing.
yeah.
And yeah,
Oh,
so special. You just inherit, like you've given that gift to so many people and the kids as well, right? Like that was a big part
definitely.
of, yeah, music is such a beautiful tool.
Hmm. It
Yeah.
does, and it brings you together. It
Yeah.
just bonded our family, and my husband Tim played the drums, and so we started a little band called the Fiddle Dee Dees, and we would go to seniors' homes or to
Oh,
churches and play for them, and yeah, that was our little family band that we did
that's
for several years. Yeah,
that's really special. That's really special.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
well,
that's good.
yeah, that's amazing.
And so
Um,
then we eventually moved to BC, and then we had a tragedy, and in our just a tragic situation with um, our oldest son and daughter, and they um, yeah, I don't hardly know how to go into it, but just that um, we were living life, and we had moved, and I had lived in Alberta for 40 years, and then we moved, and we were getting settled, and it was in January, and then in March we get a knock on the door, and there are 2 social workers at our door, and they asked to come in and asked us how we disciplined our children, and we explained to them what we did, and then one of them took our children and interviewed them, and they, within 90 minutes of them coming to the door, and we didn't even know they were coming, within 90 minutes they said, we're taking them all, and they just took the children out of our home, and we didn't see them. So that was 9 years ago, and I haven't seen the girls since that day that they were taken. And we have seen our oldest son a few times, and just in different instances, but not for any length of time. So
okay.
that was just devastating for us to
Yeah.
have that happen. And
Yeah.
um, so that was probably, hands down, that was the event that has changed our
Yeah.
lives
Yeah.
for
Wow.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
you can feel comfortable to say no, but if you're okay to wind back a little bit. So you get this
Hmm.
knock at the door and you're not sure who it is. And it's, I think, I remember you telling me once, was it a Saturday, like a normal weekend, was it?
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
Saturday morning. We have a brunch every most Saturday mornings, and we were washing up the dishes. It was 11:30 in the morning, and yeah, the knock came on the door.
And at this point, how old are the kids? How old are your kids?
They are 13, 12, 10, and 8.
13, 12, 10, and 8. And do you, when they come into the house, do you understand? Do you ever know why they're there? Like, is there any knowing, or is it just someone
Yeah,
said something, or?
yeah, our oldest daughter um had been she had been caught lying about her schoolwork and not doing her schoolwork, and we had to take away privileges from her, and she wasn't able to go to this new youth group that she had just started with, and so she was not a happy camper at the time, and she had made accusations about my husband and I, and so she called a hotline, a children's hotline,
Okay.
saying that there was um, physical abuse,
Okay.
and so they they believed them, and they took the children to a scan clinic or a hospital in Kamloops, and they looked them over with a fine-tooth comb to see if there's any physical signs of abuse, and there was nothing to record, but they still believed
Right.
their testimony. But I had chosen from time to time to spank my children on the bum and
Hmm.
with a implement.
Right.
If they were lying or they refused to obey, and that was how I was brought up, to do that, and I respected my dad and mom for their discipline in that way, and it wasn't daily or frequent, but it did
Yeah.
happen from
Yeah.
time to time.
Right.
And so that, um, because I had admitted to that, then um, I was also charged for assault with a weapon, for my for that.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and so then we were fighting to get our children back, and we were also fighting to these charges in
Right.
criminal court. Yeah, so it ended up, because I had admitted that I had spanked the children, um, that those charges were gonna, the verdict from the judge said, I had many affidavits of people just sharing how they knew me and my character, and she said, I read the affidavits, and Mrs. Nemeth is not a threat to her community, but she still had to give a penalty because I admitted to the
Wow.
charges, and so I had probation for 2 years, where I would go to probation office once a week and check in and talk to an officer, and they would ask me every week, have you seen your children? There was a restraining order from me again towards my children, that I couldn't be within 100 meters of them. It was, or that I couldn't, the um, what do you call them? The prosecution, they were trying to get it so that I couldn't go into schools or um, shopping mall, like community places, to be around children. Like, it was just
Wow.
unbelievable. The how far the extent to which they wanted to penalize me. And so yeah, I was asked every week, have you had contact with your children? And that was really hard to
Wow.
have to say to them each week, no. And our son, even, um, he ended up living with his biological grandmother, and she lived just blocks away from the church we were attending. And so he knew, we had taken him to that church. And so he would show up 2 or 3 times, and
Aw.
I would see him at the back of the church, and I wanted so badly to hug him and to talk to him. And yet, if I did, I could go to jail, or I could have a $2,000 fine for just, like our lawyer said, even if you have eye contact with them, they can
Oh my gosh.
penalize you. And it just such a wicked thing in my eyes. So
Oh.
it was very, just a trying time for sure.
Wow.
For sure.
Wow. I can imagine the questions you must have had about your own self. Like, as a mom, you do everything you can for your kids. And when you feel like you're failing in any way, but then when you have all of these people, all these voices that are coming to you about saying who you are and what you can't do now, I can't imagine how that must have like a soul crusher.
Yeah, it really, it just, you feel like an outcast. You feel like you don't belong anywhere, because if you can't be with your children, where can you be? Like it just, it felt, and I felt I lost confidence in even being around families with children. I felt like I was being monitored or judged or wondered, like a stigmatism. It felt like there
Right.
was a
Yeah.
stigmatism.
To who you are. Knowing
Right.
that you are your mothering was only of love to them. There's no
Right.
harming your
Right.
children. You were like the
Yeah.
calmest person I've ever met. And to have those accusations is I don't understand, as I'm sure everybody in your circle in your world doesn't understand. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
It's so strange to have these strangers come into your home and make accusations, and like they just don't know you. Like if they would have brought us in for counseling or some sort of, like, to try to, there just wasn't any way that they wanted to to make it better, like to bring us together as a family. It was so strange. When we were in court, the first time we were in court, I was on the stand. Sorry, not the first time. In family court, when we had to be in two different courts, the criminal court and the family court. And in the family court, I was on the stand for 3.5 hours, and my dad was in the courtroom with us. Tim was that my husband was there, and they just they don't see, they just don't see the way that that I see things, that you can discipline and love, and not because you're angry, or like it just, they call it hitting, they call it abuse, they call it they didn't know what to do with me. They told us to take a family, social services told us to take a family course. So Tim and I took a family course on parenting, and they told me to take an anger management course. And that was all all their recommendation. And then they, yeah, it was so, and we did those things, and there was still no,
There's no repairing that. Yeah.
no repairing. And they also went to, they were petitioning the judge, saying that they what was the viability of readopting the children. Like, we were fighting to try to get them back, and they were fighting to find them a new home in the same breath. It just,
Wow.
it's so so strange. I'm just gonna grab a cleanup.
Yes, absolutely. No worries.
Yeah, so sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, so we had a counselor, and she was actually a children's counselor. She worked with children, but we were paired up with her through my husband's work, and just a beautiful lady who was established in the community that we were so new that in. And she had a equestrian, it was a horse ranch essentially, and so she would do therapy for mums or ladies who were abused, or children who were abused. And she just was so great. I spent about 3 years in counseling with her, Tim and I, for the first year and a half, and then I continued on for another year and a half at least with her. And she even testified in court on my behalf, and in family court. And just, she was such a source of healing for me. She really helped me through that time.
Wow.
It was such a dark time. Just,
Yeah.
yeah. And yet there's good throughout, because of our relationship with God, and he is good, and so there is good through it. Like, I always equated it to being like it was like a nightmare, like a dream. Like this, there was one part of this with the children, and trauma and chaos, and that was there, but on my side, or within me, it was okay. Like, it was
Right.
there was, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like two different realities, two different worlds.
Like a current underneath it all, would you say? Like this current that flowed underneath the trauma?
Yeah. Yeah. It, yeah. It was like, it was just, there's a stability in just knowing who you are. You know, like, even though you're hearing these things, the reality is, no, this is how I handle myself. This is how I live my life. This is how I believe. And you're saying these things, but they're just not true. They're just not the truth of my life. And so, yeah, it plays with your mind. Your mind, you feel it's a little bit crazy making in that regard, that you're being punished or judged for things that really are not
the truth of who you are.
not the truth, or didn't happen, or wasn't reality.
Right.
It was a stereotype or a version. It felt like watching somebody else's life or movie play.
Right.
I don't know. And It's hard to describe, Janelle. I'm sorry if I'm not
No, not at
making
all. I honestly think that trauma in whatever we're going through, it's hard to explain the depths of that darkness, right? It's like when it's
sense.
so dark that no light can come in, but it sounds like through your story that though it was really dark, you could still maybe not fluidly, but at times maybe fluidly, there was still like this glimmer of light that seemed to shine, that come through a bit of the darkness. Like you knew that God was, he was still holding you, and you felt that embrace despite the words that were spoken that weren't true. And I can't even imagine, Saralynn, like sitting in court. I've only had very little taste of being in court, and it's not a place that I don't think anyone knows what we're going into when we go into places like that, because it's not comforting in any way, shape, or form, and
No.
you don't know what's going to be said, and anything can be said, and you can't say anything in rebuttaling that either, unless you were asked to do that, to comment, or there's something. It's yeah. I can't imagine sitting in that seat where it sounds like it was. I'm guessing it was a journey. Like, I mean, court takes forever. It feels like it's just that it's so, like, the journey is so long, and each day that you're there, I can't imagine 3.5 hours. Since it's felt like 3.5 days, because like you're in this hot seat and you're being asked questions and you're hoping you're saying the right thing and you hope your memory is right, and there's so much going on in your heart and your head, and um, I
Totally.
the
Totally. Um I was in, previous to these two court situations, that the only other time I was in court was when we adopted our first son, and we
Mhm.
went to the downtown court in Calgary, and we went before the judge, and he said, "I'm pleased to grant you the adoption of your son, your adoptive
Mhm.
son." And so that was such a positive experience of
Yeah,
court. And then it was, but that was my only reference of it.
right,
And then to go into it being the one judged and tried and on trial, it's a
right,
whole different thing. And even the process of having to sit and wait for your turn and
yeah,
having to listen to everybody else's
yeah,
scenarios and things, like it feels so wrong to
hmm,
to have to be to be a stranger in somebody else's personal
yeah,
dealings. It was so uncomfortable for me, to because I am more of a private person. I don't like a lot of
yeah,
fanfare and stuff. So it was, that there was a shame component, definitely, of
mm,
having to be there, to be the one being prosecuted, and to be the one, and to listening to others, having to, not the option to
right,
not be there, right? It
right.
just, um yeah, that was really, I
That's a
wouldn't
lot.
want to go back there for sure.
No,
It
and the stress that that
and
would put
even,
on you.
yeah, and even just having to drive by the location of the courthouse and stuff, it
Mm,
was, for years, I would avoid it. I would drive another route just so I wouldn't have to go by it. Um, but now I can do it now. It's not a great feeling, but it doesn't take me in a mental
right.
direction I don't want to go.
Yeah, not as triggering over the years.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Wow.
for that.
And like stress does like so much. I think even um I mean, I can imagine you and your husband, you're together on this, but even the strain of that can create such upheaval in your own relationships with people that you do life with closely, you know. Like, I think when you're in stress, and when things are really really tight and tough, and you're not sleeping and you're not probably not eating, and your mind's always going, it plays on every part of your life, not just you, but it plays on, relationships, it plays on people around you. And I can't imagine, like that, like you said earlier, like feeling like you kind of had a label, like, you felt people thought of you differently, or you felt like they like labeled you a certain way because of the circumstance. Even that constant questioning and churning, would be so hard on just your mental health and your knowing of who you are, you know. Um,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
it sure did. I remember, I don't know what the time frame would have been, but your family had come down for a wedding at Sparkling Hill, and Greg, um, I just talked to him briefly, but he looked at me, and I don't even know the exact words he used. I think I wrote it in my journal, but he he just looked at me and said, "We know who you are," or something to that effect.
Mm.
And that was so pivotal in my it just hearing that from people who have known me, who have known my past. And there's something so strange, Janelle, to have this happen, and there was no deep connections with anyone in BC at that point,
Yeah.
except my aunt and my cousin, and they lived in Kelowna, and they supported us. They did support us. But to have people know, just to grow up and know one another, and it helped my sanity. It helped
Yeah.
when I would hear that or something, it just it told me that you're not crazy, Sarah. You're not
Mm.
believing a lie about yourself. That's
Right.
what it helped me to
Mm.
regain focus about it.
Mm.
So, so like you said, what was that pivotal change? That's what this was. Is it? I felt like I felt like I was Wonder Woman in the strength that I could continue living with
Mm.
without having my children with me, and yet to speak about my children or to remember them, and that it was like kryptonite.
Mm.
It was like they were the kryptonite, and I would just lose strength and power when I would remember or talk about them. There was such pain there, and now I can look through a photo album. I can't look at live video yet, but I can look through photo albums and see a picture, and not having searing pain at
Right.
at not having them with me. Um, but I did feel when my thoughts weren't on my children, I just felt super strong that I could keep living and breathing and existing
Mm.
without them. And that's so
Wow.
strange to say that, but it is the truth.
Yeah.
And it's their physical presence that is the grief and the loss of. I remember my youngest daughter just holding, like she would just put her arms around me and squeeze the tightest she could,
No.
and it would actually, like, she'd dig her chin into my stomach, and it would even hurt a little bit because it was just, she was so strong. But those are the things that I miss the most, are those,
Mm.
the the physical the physical touch, and just living on them, and
Yeah.
getting that, having that reciprocated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you said earlier, like when you first got them, like kids have a way of like bringing out this like joy and radiance and sunshine into any day, and you had four beaming sunshines in your life, and that
Yeah.
held you and hugged you and loved you and ran to you, and then to have wake up on a Sunday and like you said, I'm living someone else's, like, it's like a story you're seeing as a distance, but it doesn't feel like it's real.
No, no, no. And it happened to both of us, to my
Yeah.
husband and me. Like it was so hard on him. So hard. I remember one day we were leaving the office of Children and Family Services to try and talk with them to see. We kept trying to get access to have visitation with the children, and they kept blocking us. They kept saying that we couldn't have visitation due to an ongoing criminal investigation. That was their blanket statement, is that they wouldn't give us even supervised access. Like, it was so wrong. It was so wrong. And neither of us, like, not even if, because I was described as the offender. And so
Right.
even like Tim, like that they wouldn't, even Tim couldn't, like, it just so strange. And then they tried to say, well, if you and your husband separated, then maybe he could go to court and try to get the children himself. Like they were looking at ways
Wow.
of dividing us as a husband and wife. But Tim was just so strong with me. He just, the whole way, he held my hand and he put his arm around me in court, and he just loved on me in those really tough times, and really an amazing man.
Mm.
Um, to just, and he went through stuff too. But I'm sorry, the story I'm saying is we tried to have visitation. We left the building, and Tim got a beep on his phone, and he said, "Oh, I missed my flight." He had missed a flight because he had to go work out of town, and he had totally forgot about it. But it was just his, and it had never happened before. But I just said, "Oh, Tim, we got, you need a break
Mm.
from," because he was working and going through court and all of it.
Wow.
Whereas I had stopped teaching music when I left Calgary, um, and I had intended to start teaching again when I got to be involved in the community, but I wasn't teaching, which was a gift in itself, so that
Yeah.
I could deal with all of this
Yeah.
at the time. So
Wow.
I didn't teach for a year.
Wow.
Um, and then, yeah, and then when a gift was um, a pastor and his wife that we went to Bible school with at Rocky Mountain College in the early 90s. We didn't know them really. We had just seen them and we weren't friends with them. But here they were pastoring a church in Kelowna, and they had connection with our son's birth grandmother, and then our son's birth mother had passed away, and this pastor officiated at the grandmother's house, the
Oh, wow.
celebration of life. And we ended up going to their church, and they just loved on us. It was a small community church, and we shared our story of what had happened with the kids, and they just grafted us in and loved on us. And
Mm.
um, it wasn't, they were more of a mainstream church, or like I was used to more of a charismatic church. So it was a different feeling there. And um, just solid people though, that knew how to pray and loved
Mm.
God. And it was time for us to just lay back and take in the
That's
healing that we
amazing.
needed.
Wow. And did you
Oh,
find closure and connection, or not closure so much, but maybe like a comfort and knowing that someone that knew that, had some kind of connection to your son, like because the pastor had officiated his birth mother's like life celebration, her passing. Did it kind of feel like there was some sort of a comfort in knowing someone that knew him? Did they know your son at that time, or was
Yeah,
he? Yeah, they did.
yeah, like they knew the birth mom and the birth grandmother.
Okay.
And then they only had met our birth son Seth when we came, so
Okay.
they didn't know him very well, but they did have some sort of connection after that, like after the celebration of life. And the pastor and his wife, she homeschooled her children, and I had been homeschooling mine, so we had that connection. And
Okay.
she owned a homeschooling bookstore here in Kelowna.
Oh,
And
cool.
then she asked me if I wanted to have a teaching studio as part of her homeschooling bookstore
Oh,
and
cool.
teach lessons through there. And so I rented a 400 square foot space, not very big, but it was enough to teach from. And we um, we were in business together, kind of thing. And it was,
Wow.
so we did that for a few 3-4 years, and then they moved away to Chilliwack to pastor um, a church or a camp. They became camp pastors at a camp out there
Okay.
in Chilliwack. So, and I continued on teaching at the studio until last year. And now I'm
Wow.
teaching from home and going to people's homes and teaching their kids.
No.
And
Wow.
yeah,
So you're still loving people, children, and finding ways to like mentor, even though it's not
yeah,
your for,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's been a
How- Do you
quite
think
a
that's been a
time.
part of your healing, Saralynn, is having that interaction and actually being in, in the space of children? Like it's part of your healing. Do you think it's, yeah.
Yeah, I really do. The the homeschool mom who had the bookstore that I was in business with, her youngest daughter was almost the same age as my youngest daughter, and they looked similar, like they had
Wow.
similar features in their face. And she was one of my first students that I took
Aw.
on when I started, and I would sit there and be teaching her, and it was like my daughter was right there next to me and I was teaching her again. Like it
Mm.
was so surreal. Just um and I really had to pinch myself that that no, it's not your daughter, this is her daughter. But the similarities were just striking to me. and
Wow.
and and she liked me, and she
Hmm.
wanted to be taught by me, and there was just a comfort there to know that I was a safe place. And that's the thing, is I
Yeah.
to have these restrictions and penalties and stuff, it makes you feel like you're not a safe person to be
Right.
around, like it
Yeah.
with that. And so
Right.
every time a parent trusted me, and I was truthful with them about, like this mom, she had offered to come to court to be support to me, like she
Hmm.
knew everything that I was being accused of,
Wow.
and yet she still trusted me to teach her child and to be one-on-one with them, and I know I never should have not been trusted in the first place, but that was the result of having that
Mm.
happen, uh, from society. Like it just,
Yeah.
and I still have to pay the rest of my life in ways like I can't travel, I can't go across the border, um yeah, there's just things that restrictions that still,
Like for the
even
duration of your
years
life?
ago, like, pardon me.
Like, sorry, so you can't leave the country for your entire life? Is that what that is that, or is that going to be
They
leaving at some point, or is that going to change?
No, like it's just, that's the restriction. They um I can apply for a US entry travel waiver, they call it, and it's quite expensive, thousands of dollars, and but um you have to write a letter saying what your charges were and what you did wrong, and like, and then they decide if they'll let you in or not. Like they
Wow.
and I said, I don't know how to tell them that what I did was wrong. I mean, I just don't. I don't know how to confess to something that I just don't feel wrong about doing. And so so it is ultimately my choice, I guess, that I'm not going to be able to travel, or unless a miracle happens and something opens up. But um it yeah, I they want me to confess to hitting and abusing my children, and I don't feel that I did abuse my children. I
Yeah.
just don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those kind of things that,
Yeah.
and yeah, but they'll I know that God has a plan, and he can work it out. He can make me be able to travel
Yeah.
in some way, and he did that. Like, even with teaching, like I was able to teach, to be paid by the government for teaching music to children through the online Christian school. Um, and that was a miracle how that came about. And so God, he makes a way. He's a
Mm-hmm.
way maker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He can make it a way, and he has. So
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about it, but it does. I I certainly feel for anybody who goes through court and situations and like that, because you feel very alone in
Yeah.
that regard.
Yeah.
Not a lot of support
No.
in that.
No. And a lot of knowing. There's no knowing where how it's gonna go, right? It's
Yes, yes. And the rule, like they have rules and things that just you didn't know.
yeah.
and and yet, I remember getting a phone call from our criminal lawyer and him saying, yeah, there's $2,000 worth of fees that you need to pay, and like, just, and he needs it
Wow.
ASAP kind of thing to proceed. And I'm in the car with my mom, and we were driving, and I just, you just kind of go into shock with these things, like even going to the mailbox and getting mail
Mm.
with them telling you when your court date is coming. Like, you just never know when these things are
Right.
coming, and they just, every time they kind of just freeze you.
Right.
And and I remember my mom, she said, Sarah, let's go to the bank. And she just drove me to the bank and handed me the money to pay our lawyer.
Wow.
And and it was just it was a miracle, like an instant
Mhm.
miracle. And so I was
Mhm.
able to bring that money to him right away, and we continued the process, but it was, um, there was miracle time. We would get people, um, at least three different families just sent us money, just saying, we want to help you with your court fees, or we want to bless you with this. And we would get these little surprises in the mail as well, which were just huge blessings. And
Wow.
then Karen McNaughton, she rallied some people to write letters to me. She didn't explain all
Mm.
the she didn't explain much about what I was going through, but she put together all these letters
Wow.
and sent them to me, and I still have them in a binder here that I've collected, and just just
Mm.
reminded me of who I
Who you
was to
are.
them, and who I am. Yeah, those things, and the affidavits that were written for court, I still have all of those. And
Mm.
you just have to hold on to the good,
Yeah. Yeah.
cling to it.
And yeah, and cling to the words of people that do know you, like I know who you are, we know who you are, and those things, just going, okay, people, the assurance of like, I am a good person. And even though sometimes it might be like I'd question myself, but the people,
Yeah.
the community, your friends from long ago, your family being like reminding you of the amazing human that you are.
Oh,
And we've all had anyone that's, that I know of that's gotten a chance to know you, is just like, Saralynn is like the calmest, most caring, most loving human. And you've held many of us in our own pain, even when you haven't known it. And
wow.
I'm so glad that others have held you in the midst of your own pain and darkness. Because isn't that what brings us out? Isn't that what carries us? Isn't that what reminds us that there is tomorrow coming, and tomorrow can have some light, even if today feels awfully dark?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's right. You do.
Yeah.
You keep
It's,
living and loving, and
yeah.
forgiving,
Hmm.
and having forgiveness in your heart towards those who have hurt you
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Forgiving and not holding on to that, right? Because that is detrimental to our whole well-being, holding on to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
do. And I am certainly have made mistakes, and I wish I could have done things differently at times, but I know that um that, that God loves me, and he knows my love for my children. And for
Hmm.
those, I kind of live by that, like love God and love others. Like
Hmm.
in that same
Hmm.
breath, just
Hmm.
love God and love others.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can't go wrong. You
No.
just can't go wrong.
No. Because when you love, you can't hold on to the bitterness and the anger. It's like love has this other soothing. It's when you can love, it has another, it's like it blankets everything else, right? And it feels like you
Yeah,
can't, yeah, there's no oxygen to the other things. Love just like,
right.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so true. I love the way you said that. It blankets it. It covers. It
Hmm.
covers the whole thing. Love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it cuts the breath of the other things, right? It cuts the breath of
Mm,
the anger, cuts the breath of the pain. There's something about love, I think, that is something that we should all lean towards
yeah,
in life. Yeah, yeah. No matter what trauma we're going through, if we can reach for that, I think that there is a beautiful transformation that happens in our own hearts, with loving. Yeah,
really does.
Hmm.
It's transforming.
It is. It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, I'm so, I feel like extremely honored that you would sit with me today and
Mm.
talk about some of the most painful things um, that I can't begin to imagine the journey and the pain. Um, and so I hold this very sacred, and I feel very honored that
Mm.
you would join me in this space and talk about the journey and the shame and the pain and even the peace that's come through the season and the courage and how you felt like this mother bear, like a superwoman kind of thing take over, and the journey of driving past, places that trigger. Um, I don't think, Sarah, we don't know who is walking their own story and how our stories can liberate and literally give somebody else breath for their tomorrow. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I really hope that it does. That it will bring breath
yeah,
and
yeah.
life. And I and the only reason I would would do this with you, Janelle, is because I trust you and I just love who you are and how you live. How you live your life with your children, and your youngest boy has the same birthday as my youngest girl. And
Oh,
every time you would write your wonderful birthday message to your kids or about them, and I would secretly pretend that I was writing that to my daughter and
aw.
that I could share those sentiments with her because um, I felt like our lives paralleled in many ways with in regards to homeschooling and advent, adventures with the family, and I kind of lived vicariously through your family's adventures these past few years,
Mm,
and how you've so inspired me with your struggles and what you guys had to go through as well. Oh, just I could
mm,
empathize for
mm.
sure.
Wow,
The
wow.
border and everything, all those things. Just, oh,
Uh,
what a time.
yeah,
And you so
yeah.
eloquently shared your
Mm,
lives with countless people, countless others. You'll have no
mm,
idea the
mm.
impact that that has made
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Sarah.
on me and so many, I
Mm,
am sure. But
wow.
thank you for
Yeah,
doing
no,
this.
thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing in the midst of still pain 9 years later. I can imagine there's still, like you said, you're not watching videos, but you can look at pictures. And the journey continues. But as you make these little steps towards, feeling healing and feeling peace about, the future and knowing that God is holding you in the midst of all of this, um, I'm I'm grateful, and I don't take it lightly. I definitely hold you in a very sweet spot in my heart, and I treasure all the years we had together that were very intertwined, and we were very much in each other's lives on a daily. It felt like when I was younger, to even today, and the times that we've gotten to talk and share and just share a safe space, for each other. I think that you did that for me first, shared a safe space for me first. Yeah. And I really, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm so
So
glad to hear that.
I like to always end it with a couple like questions, because I think that maybe it leads to something that is goodness to someone that's needing that. So one of the things I would ask, I was thinking like, what are some of the questions that maybe someone could really use a need at the end of this is like somebody's going through loss or pain, And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and lots of people are going through loss, and lots of people are going through pain in a plethora of ways. Um, and what's one thing you would tell somebody who is sitting maybe in darkness, um, is sitting in loss, sitting in pain? What is there one thing that you would say to someone, or um, would you whisper something to them that might, you know, wake them, be a bit of light in their darkness?
I know it may sound contrite, but I would say to them that Jesus is the answer for what they're going through, that he is the one that picked me up and brought life back into me. And I chose it though. I I chose to open the Bible. I chose to memorize scripture. I chose to sing and do those things that I did. It was just instinctual that I felt like that was the only thing I knew to do to to keep living and to keep breathing. And so that's what I would say to them is look for Jesus, seek him, and you'll find him in that place of darkness. And and he does. He brings everything that he brought everything that I needed
Mm.
to live and not just survive now. I went through that stage of feeling like every day it was just surviving. But I can say now that in my spirit, in my healing of my emotions, I am thriving in my spirit
Mm.
because of choosing life
Mm.
in Christ.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm. That's
what I
beautiful.
would say.
I love it. Okay, on one last one to end it off. What's one thing that has brought you joy in the last month, the last week, today, that you're just like, you felt that like in your belly, like, sense of joy?
Oh, well, just yesterday, I was leading worship at our church with our worship leader, Daniel, and I got a text from my mom, and she just said, "Oh, I have. Oh, do I? Oh, it's on my phone. I can't get it." But she just said that. I was gonna read it for word for word, but she just said that she was so impacted by the worship and that she felt like the angels were right there where we were leading worship and how it just ministered to her spirit and just hearing those words, like afterwards you think, oh, I would have done this differently, or I could have done this differently.
Yeah.
You second guess yourself so much, and I had done that a little bit, and then later, a few hours later, I get this message, and it was almost like that love covering or blanket that you spoke of, like it just over my heart, and it really did bring joy. It wasn't yippee, that excitement, but it was just like a steadfast joy in my
Mm.
heart, knowing that it takes sacrifice and to do
Yeah.
what I did yesterday, and yet it was to know that somebody else was impacted by it.
Yeah.
That means the world to me. To
Totally.
me.
Totally.
Yeah,
I love that. I love
that
that.
was
You never know when, like in life, when you're going to impact somebody, or when you're going to bring peace to somebody else. I think in, whether
no,
it's being on a stage, or it's smiling to someone at a grocery store, or it's just, you know, anything little, leaving a post-it note on someone's car, you just never know when the
yeah,
little gestures, the little parts of you showing up and just being you, which is just you being you, Sarah, and your
right,
voice and your playing, and just like, and that shifted someone's day that maybe shifts someone's life. And like you said, like the letters that you've gotten and all the affidavits that you got, like you've kept those because they shifted, they did something inside of you, they reminded you of who you are. And it's just the little things, using your voice, an instrument, playing on, street corner, playing on a stage. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know when you leave somebody with something super extra special. And it sounds like that's what your mom felt, was like harmony in her heart. You did something through just being you. Yeah. Which is pretty spectacular, because you're a pretty spectacular human. And being Saralynn takes someone like you have the special goodness that I think most of us we hope that you'll rub off on us, because you're just that good of a human. And I adore you with my whole heart. I know I always have. And
Thank you.
So grateful that we met, and so grateful that our worlds, found each other when I was just 15 years old.
Yeah.
And we've been able to be in each other's life in some way. And I'm a better human because of you. So thank you for being you. Thank you for singing. Thank you for taking the courage and showing up when you were the young, when you're the last child who's maybe not as confident as the older ones, but as you rose in your confidence, you've reminded us who were the third child who maybe didn't have the confidence to also rise and have a voice. And yeah, you've made an impact. And when someone once said something to me that I thought it changed the way I saw things, they said, you can never uninvest in someone's life. And I love that. I thought, man,
I love that.
right?
I love that.
What you left with your kids, you can never uninvest in their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? The only, in my belief, the only thing that's going to last is people, our spirits.
Yeah.
So we're investing in one another's spirits, and that's for eternity.
Yeah.
Like, even if our bodies go, right, our bodies perish, our spirits will still live on. And so we're investing for eternity in one another, in people.
It's amazing.
It is. It's the best return ever.
Well, I thank you so much. I love you, and I hope that one day we can have a picnic together and catch up face to face or something. But yeah, thank you.
Please come see me.
Yes, it's greener there. I want to come.
It's really greening up now.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, have an amazing rest of your day, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. I am forever grateful.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I love you, my friend. Okay. Take care.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcast goodness. This way you'll never miss out on any future episodes, plus it really helps us. And if you want to share your favorite episode with a friend, that would be absolutely incredible. This goes a long way. If you'd like to join Naked by sharing part of your story, just leave us a message on Instagram or email us at nakedwithjanelle@gmail.com. Also, a big thanks to my son, Mikkel, who is the best cheerleader and maybe one of the biggest believers in Naked, and also produces and edits all our podcasts. I am beyond grateful for him and very aware that I couldn't do this on my own. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being here.